The vast chamber of the Galactic Council glowed with soft blue light. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in rising tiers around a central speaking platform. The air hummed with translation devices and the quiet whispers of a dozen species. James Miller sat straight-backed in the human delegation's seat. His gray suit was perfectly pressed, his face calm despite the growing tension in his chest. For 6 hours, he had listened to the council members talk about everything except Earth's petition for full membership. The human territories must increase their ore exports by 30%, said Councillor Thorne, his tall, thin body swaying as he spoke. His skin had the texture of tree bark, and his 4 eyes blinked in different patterns. This is non-negotiable. Miller made a note on his tablet. Another demand. Always demands, never compromises. And what does Earth receive in return? He asked, his voice steady. Thorne made a dismissive gesture with 3 of his 6 limbs. The continued protection of the Galactic Council, of course. The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement. Miller noticed how the larger species nodded while the smaller ones remained silent. The pattern was always the same. Earth has requested access to the Council's medical database for 3 decades, Miller said. Yet we are still denied. Your species is too young, rumbled the massive representative of the Carex Dominion, a creature that looked like a walking mountain of purple crystal. The knowledge must be earned. Miller took a slow breath. For 50 years, Earth had played by their rules. For 50 years, humans had been patient, offering their technology, resources, and labor in exchange for a seat at the table. And for 50 years, the Council had moved the goalposts. His secure tablet vibrated. A message from Admiral Elizabeth Stone appeared on the screen. *URGNT. Long-range sensors DTTCT massive ifeliet SMBLOD in CT2or17. Council species markings CONFI or MED. *. Miller felt a cold rush through his body. Sector 17 was only 2 jumps from Earth. There was no reason for a fleet to gather there, unless the Council had been planning something all along. A second message flashed. * from Earth Command. Abandon ni GOTLHHONS ein MEDLATLY. Code Phoenix ein NIT 8 *. Miller looked up at the chamber full of beings who had been lying to his face for years. His earpiece quietly delivered a soft voice from Earth. We've seen enough. Ambassador, it's time to walk away. The Iridian representative was speaking now, listing new regulations for human colonies. Miller stood up slowly, interrupting the alien mid-sentence. The chamber fell silent. No one interrupted council proceedings. Ambassador Miller, said the Grand Speaker, his gelatinous body pulsing with light. You have not been recognized to speak. Miller smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. I don't need your recognition anymore, he said. His voice was calm but carried throughout the chamber. As of this moment, Earth and all human colonies formally withdraw from all negotiations with the Galactic Council. Shocked murmurs rippled through the room. You cannot simply withdraw, said Thorne, his body stiffening with alarm. There are protocols, procedures. We're done with your procedures, Miller said. He closed his tablet and slipped it into his pocket. For 50 years, humanity has offered friendship and received exploitation in return. We have honored every agreement while you have broken yours whenever convenient. This is most irregular. The Grand Speaker pulsed rapidly, his lights flashing in distress. Earth has contributed more technological advances in 5 decades than some of your members have in centuries, Miller continued. Yet we are still treated as children. No more. Are you threatening the Council? Asked the Carex representative, leaning forward. Miller laughed. It was a sound that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Not at all. We're just going home. He turned and walked toward the exit. The human aides at the back of the room were already packing their materials, their movements quick and practiced. Ambassador Miller, called Thorne. If you leave now, there will be consequences. Miller paused at the door and looked back at the chamber. "There certainly will be," he said quietly, "just not the ones you're expecting." The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss. In the shocked silence that followed, the council members looked at each other with growing unease. No one had ever walked away from the Galactic Council before. No one knew what would happen next. 3 days after Ambassador Miller's dramatic exit, the Galactic Council still struggled to make sense of humanity's actions. No one had expected such a bold move. "Where are they?" demanded Councillor Thorne, pacing the length of the emergency chamber. His bark-like skin had darkened with stress. "We have sent 16 official messages to Earth, all ignored." The Grand Speaker's body rippled with concern. "Not ignored. The response is always the same. The human delegation is unavailable for communication." On the main viewing screen, red dots blinked out one by one across the galaxy map. Each disappearing light marked a human diplomatic outpost shutting down. "They're withdrawing everything," said the small, furry representative of the novel species. "Not just diplomats. Trading posts, research stations, cultural centers, all closing." Admiral Varix of the Carix Dominion rumbled from his crystalline seat. "Let them go. They will come crawling back when they need our protection." "Will they?" asked the novel representative. Her large eyes reflected the changing map. "Look at what they're doing." The screen shifted to show a human mining colony in the Centauri system. Usually bustling with activity, the massive operation had ground to a halt. Hundreds of ships were being loaded with equipment. The enormous processing plants were being systematically dismantled. "They're taking everything of value," whispered Thorne, "leaving nothing behind." "The economic disruption is already severe," reported a financial advisor. "Human trade makes up 17% of galactic commerce. 3 trading hubs have reported market crashes." The Grand Speaker pulsed with angry lights. "This is unacceptable. They cannot simply leave." But they were leaving, quietly, methodically, without drama or threats. Aboard the Earth Defense Vessel _Determination _, Admiral Elizabeth Stone watched the withdrawal operations on multiple screens. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her uniform crisp despite the 36 hours she'd been on duty. "Status report," she ordered. Her second-in-command, Captain Rogers, checked his tablet. 93% of diplomatic staff extracted. 78% of commercial operations packed up. Mining equipment at 64%. Stone nodded. "And our special project?" "On schedule, Admiral. The Council has no idea what we're building." Stone allowed herself a small smile. "Keep it that way." A communication officer called out, "Admiral." Another message from the Council. "Same response as before," Stone said without looking away from the screens. "Also, we've detected scout ships near the Proxima outpost. They're watching us." Stone's smile faded. "Let them watch. Just make sure they don't see anything important." Back on Earth, the streets of New Geneva hummed with activity. While the public news spoke vaguely of diplomatic readjustments, factories worked around the clock. Workers poured out of massive industrial complexes as shifts changed. Military bases were sealed off from public view. Inside the United Defense Command headquarters, General Thomas Ward studied reports from across human space. "Are we really doing this?" asked his aide, a young officer named Davis. Ward looked up from his screens. "They've left us no choice. The fleet they're gathering near Sector 17 was the final proof. They never intended to treat us as equals." "But, sir, cutting off all contact with the rest of the galaxy is exactly what they don't expect," Ward finished. "For 50 years, we've been predictable, reliable. Now we're neither." He pointed to a classified report. "Besides, we're not cutting off contact forever. We're just buying time." "Time for what, sir?" Ward's eyes hardened. "Time to show them exactly what humanity can do when pushed too far." On the Council station, the emergency session entered its second day. Representatives argued about how to respond to humanity's silence. "We should send a fleet to Earth," suggested Admiral Varix. Show them the consequences of defiance. The novel representative's fur bristled. That would be a terrible mistake. Humans are dangerous when cornered. Dangerous. Thorn laughed. They have a few hundred ships. The Council has thousands. The novel stood up, her small size belying her intensity. You don't understand them. I've studied humans for 20 years. When they go quiet like this, it means they're planning something. Planning what? Asked the Grand Speaker. The novel looked at the map, where another red dot had just disappeared. That's what should terrify you. 3 months passed. The sudden hole in galactic trade left by humanity's departure had caused economic troubles across multiple sectors. But now something else was spreading through the Council worlds. Fear. In the luxurious private chamber of Councillor Thorn, 5 of the most powerful representatives in the galaxy met in secret. What are they doing? Asked Thorn, pouring a glowing blue liquid for his guests. His hand shook slightly. It's been 3 months. No messages, no demands, nothing. Admiral Varix of the Carix Dominion shifted his massive crystalline form. Our spy ships report unusual energy readings from their star systems, particularly around their sun. The Grand Speaker's body pulsed with dim lights. Explain. A small gray-skinned scientist named Meal activated a holographic display. This is Sol, the human home star, as it appeared 1 year ago. The image showed a typical yellow star. And this, Meal continued, is Sol today. The new image showed the same star, but with strange geometric patterns visible on its surface. What are we seeing? Asked Thorn. We don't know, Meal admitted. They appear to be changing their star somehow. Heavy silence fell over the room. That's impossible, Varix finally said. No species can manipulate a star. The novel representative, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Perhaps we've underestimated them. There's more, Meal said. Energy output from their planets has tripled, and we've detected unusual ripples in space-time near their borders. Thorn walked to the window, looking out at the gleaming Council station. Could they be building weapons? Almost certainly, said Varix, which is why we must strike first, before they become too powerful. The novel representative's fur bristled. That would be unwise. We don't know what they're capable of. They're just humans, Varix rumbled dismissively. Clever, yes, but still primitive compared to the elder races. Are they? The novel pulled out a small device and projected an image of a human exploration vessel that had been spotted near an uninhabited system. Our patrol tried to approach this ship last week. It vanished. Not jumped to hyperspace. Vanished. No trace. The Grand Speaker's lights flickered rapidly. That's concerning. We should send a diplomatic fleet to Earth, suggested Thorn. A show of force to remind them of their place, but officially just a mission to restart dialogue. The novel shook her small head. I advise against. Your advice is noted, interrupted Varix. But the Council cannot appear weak. If we allow one species to simply walk away, others might follow. The vote was quick. 4-1 in favor of sending the fleet. On the distant world of Teleris, known for its marketplaces, 2 traders spoke in hushed tones over steaming drinks. Have you heard? Asked the first, a scaled being with multiple eye stalks. They say humans have built something enormous in their home system. The second trader, a mechanical life form, whirred softly. I heard their ships can now disappear from sensors completely. My cousin works on a mining planet. The scaled trader leaned closer. He says the humans took something from deep underground before they left. Something ancient. Something powerful. At another table, a being made entirely of swirling gas solidified enough to join the conversation. The novel knows something. They've been quiet in council meetings, but they're strengthening their defenses. Smart, said the mechanical trader. Very smart. Why? Asked the scaled being. The gas creature swirled anxiously. Because the novel were the only ones who ever treated humans as equals. The rest of us may have reason to worry. Deep in human space, aboard the massive space station _Phoenix _, Admiral Stone studied the latest intelligence reports. The Council fleet has departed, reported Captain Rogers. 17 capital ships, 42 support vessels, all heavily armed despite their diplomatic mission. Stone nodded. As expected. Time to send the message to all human ships. Operation Reveal begins in 48 hours. Are we ready? Rogers asked. Stone walked to the observation deck. Beyond the reinforced windows, thousands of workers in specialized suits swarmed over a structure so vast it defied comprehension. We've been ready for months, she said. The question is, are they ready for us? In the vast darkness of space, the structure pulsed once with blue light. As if in answer, the Council's diplomatic fleet approached the edge of the Sol system, their massive ships arranged in battle formation despite their peaceful claims. At the center, the command vessel _Galactic Authority dwarfed the others, its hull gleaming with weaponry. Fleet Commander Drez stood on the bridge, his scaled skin shimmering under the lights. His 4 arms were clasped behind his back as he studied the main view screen. No sign of human defenses, reported his second-in-command. Drez nodded. As expected, begin broadcasting the message. A communication officer activated the system. Broadcasting now, Commander. Demanding humans resume negotiations and submit to Council authority. The fleet continued forward, weapons systems on standby. The mood on the bridge was relaxed, almost bored. This mission was supposed to be simple. Show up, make demands, watch the humans give in. Commander, called a sensor officer suddenly. Single ship detected ahead. Drez leaned forward. Show me. The view screen zoomed in on a small human vessel. It was barely 1/10 the size of the _Galactic Authority _, sleek and dark against the stars. That's it. Drez laughed. That's their defense. His officers joined in his amusement. The tension on the bridge melted away. We're receiving a transmission from the human vessel, reported the communication officer. Put it on screen, ordered Drez, settling into his command chair. Let's hear what excuses they offer. The image of a human appeared. He wore a simple dark uniform with minimal markings. This is Captain Marcus Reed of Earth Defense Force, said the human calmly. You are entering restricted space. Return to your territories immediately. This is your only warning. Drez stared at the screen, then burst into laughter. His entire bridge crew joined in. Or what? Drez asked when he could speak again. You have one small ship. We have a fleet. What could you possibly do? Reed's expression didn't change. We were hoping you would make this choice. The transmission ended abruptly. Drez shook his head. Humans and their bluffs. Continue forward. Full speed. The sensor officer called out suddenly. Commander, the human ship is activating something. Weapons? Drez asked, straightening. No, sir. I don't know what it is. On the view screen, the small human ship seemed to glow slightly. Then something impossible happened. Every star visible from the fleet's position dimmed simultaneously. For 3 seconds, the universe went dark except for the faint glow of the human vessel. When the stars returned to normal, the fleet's sensors screamed with alarms. Multiple contacts, shouted the sensor officer. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. The view screen showed the impossible, where empty space had been moments before. A massive human armada now surrounded the Council fleet completely. Ships of all sizes, many larger than the _Galactic Authority itself, hung in perfect formation. Where did they come from? Whispered Drez, his scales paling. How did we not detect them? The communication system activated again. Captain Reed's face appeared, still calm. Now you see us, he said simply. We've been here the whole time. Your sensors just couldn't detect us until we wanted to be seen. Drez found his voice. Impossible. No technology can hide ships from our sensors. Reed smiled slightly. Humanity has been busy these past months. We've developed technology to manipulate space-time itself. We can choose when and where to appear in this universe. Murmurs of fear spread across the bridge. "Why reveal yourselves now?" asked Drez, trying to hide his trembling. "To deliver a message to the Council," Reed replied. "We know about the fleet gathering near Sector 17. We know about the plans to attack Earth. We know everything." Drez felt cold fear run through his body. How could they know? "You have 1 hour to turn your fleet around," continued Reed. "Any hostile action will be met with immediate response. We will not fire first, but we will definitely fire last." The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Galactic Authority panic began to spread. "Orders, Commander?" asked the second in command. Drez stared at the screen, at the overwhelming force surrounding his ships. "Turn around," he said quietly. "Tell the Council. Tell them the humans are not what we thought they were." The Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives shouted over each other as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human ships had appeared everywhere, seemingly out of nowhere. "They're at every major trade route. 3 fleets spotted near the Centauri border. A human vessel just appeared next to our homeworld's defense station." Grand Speaker's body pulsed with rapid, alarmed flashes of light. "Order. We must have order." In the center of the chamber, Fleet Commander Drez stood with his head lowered, still shaken from his encounter with the human armée. "They could have destroyed us," he said, his voice barely audible above the noise. "They let us go as a message." Councillor Thorn pounded his many-jointed hand on the table. "This is an outrage. They threaten the peace of the galaxy." "Peace." The small voice of the noble representative cut through the noise. "What peace?" "The peace where the stronger species exploit the weaker ones." Before Thorn could respond, the chamber doors slid open. A human in a plain gray uniform entered, carrying a small metal case. The room fell silent. "Who are you?" demanded the Grand Speaker. "How did you get past security?" The human smiled. "My name isn't important. As for your security," he shrugged, "it needs work." He walked to the center of the chamber and placed the metal case on the main platform. With a simple gesture, it opened, revealing several glowing data crystals. "What is this?" asked Thorn, leaning forward. "The truth," replied the human. "I suggest you view it immediately." The Grand Speaker hesitated, then nodded to a technician. The crystals were inserted into the chamber's projection system. The lights dimmed. In the center of the room, a hologram appeared. It showed a meeting room much like this one, but smaller. The date stamp was from 3 years ago. The council members watched in growing horror as the recording showed Councillor Thorn, Admiral Verex, and leaders from 3 other major council species planning in secret. "The lesser species will serve as our frontline forces," Thorn was saying in the recording. "The humans especially. They breed quickly and are surprisingly effective fighters." "And when the conquest is complete," asked another figure. "Resource worlds for us, labor worlds for them," replied Verex. "They'll never know they were just tools." The recording changed, showing star maps, fleet positions, weapons designs, detailed plans for galactic conquest, using the lesser species as pawns. The chamber erupted again, but this time the shouting was directed at Thorn and the other exposed conspirators. "Silence," roared the Grand Speaker. His body was almost white with shock. Is this authentic?" The human nodded. "Every word, every plan. We discovered this 3 years ago." Understanding dawned on the Grand Speaker, "And you kept negotiating." "To buy time," confirmed the human, "while we prepared." Representatives from smaller species were on their feet now, their voices raised in anger against the exposed plotters. "You planned to use us all as cannon fodder. Our treaties meant nothing. How many of our people would have died for your conquest?" Thorn backed away from the table, his bark-like skin dark with fear. "This is a human trick. They fabricated this. The human shook his head. The data crystals contain verification codes and quantum signatures that prove their authenticity. Examine them yourselves. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Humanity didn't abandon peace negotiations because we don't want peace. We abandoned them because they were a lie. As he left, the chamber descended further into chaos. Ancient alliances shattered in minutes as the truth spread. Guards were called to restrain Thorn and the other conspirators. In the midst of the uproar, the noble representative approached the Grand Speaker. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. The Grand Speaker's lights pulsed slowly, sadly. "I don't know. The Council may not survive this." Outside the station, human ships hung silently in space, watching and waiting. On Earth, Ambassador Miller received the confirmation that the data had been delivered. "Phase 1 complete," he told Admiral Stone. "The Council is fracturing exactly as predicted." Stone nodded. "Good. Now we move to Phase 2. "Are the new alliance treaties ready?" Miller asked. "Yes," Stone replied. "The smaller species will be contacting us soon, looking for protection." Miller looked out at the stars. "The galaxy is about to change forever." "For the better," Stone added, "if we do this right." 1 week after the revelation, the galaxy was transformed. The once mighty Galactic Council had splintered. The exposed plotters, Thorn, Verex, and their allies, had retreated to their home systems, gathering their military forces. But they found themselves facing an unexpected problem. On the bridge of his command ship, Admiral Verex stared at the status reports with growing rage. "What do you mean our fleets can't join up?" he demanded. His crystalline form vibrated with anger. The navigation officer trembled. "Something is wrong with hyperspace, Admiral. Our ships can't travel through certain corridors. It's as if someone has turned off faster than light travel in those regions." "Impossible." Verex smashed a crystal fist on his command console. "No technology can do that." "The humans can," said a quiet voice from the doorway. Verex turned to see a communications officer holding a datapad. "We just received this broadcast from Earth." The main screen activated, showing Admiral Elizabeth Stone in her formal uniform. Her expression was serious but not threatening. "This is Admiral Stone of Earth Defense Force," she began. "To the species formerly known as the Galactic Council leadership, your fleets are now contained within their current regions. Human technology has allowed us to temporarily disable faster-than-light travel within specific space corridors. You cannot concentrate your forces. You cannot attack." Verex roared in fury, but Stone continued calmly. "This is not an act of war. It is an act of prevention. Your plans for conquest have been exposed. We will not allow you to regroup and threaten peaceful worlds." Across the galaxy, on 30 different planets, representatives of smaller species watched the same broadcast. But they saw a different message after Stone's introduction. "To the species who have suffered under Council rule, Earth extends an invitation. We propose a new galactic arrangement based on equal representation, transparent military capabilities, and shared technological development. We do not seek to rule. We seek partnership." On the planet Novalis, home of the noble species, their leadership council watched with interest. "Can we trust them?" asked a younger council member, her fur rippling with uncertainty. The elder who had served as their representative to the Galactic Council nodded slowly. "I believe we can. The humans could have conquered us all with their new technology. Instead, they exposed the plot against us." "They need allies," pointed out another. "Yes," agreed the elder. "And so do we." 3 days later, Ambassador James Miller stood on a platform aboard the massive human space station _Phoenix_. Before him were representatives from 30 previously marginalized species. Some had been council members but treated as inferiors. Others had been denied membership entirely. "Welcome," Miller said, his voice carrying across the large chamber. "Thank you for accepting our invitation." A tall, insect-like being stepped forward. The Zentari are grateful for Earth's intervention. Without it, we would have been used as disposable soldiers in their war. Another representative, a being made of swirling gases contained in a special suit, spoke next. The Mist Collective has always valued human creativity. Now we see your wisdom as well. Miller nodded in acknowledgement. What happens next is not up to humanity alone. We all must decide together. He gestured to a document displayed on large screens around the room. This is a draft constitution for a new galactic assembly. Equal votes for all species. Transparent military reporting. Shared technology for mutual benefit. The representatives began to discuss among themselves, their voices creating a symphony of different sounds and languages. Miller stepped back to where Admiral Stone waited at the edge of the platform. "Will they agree?" she asked quietly. "Most of them, yes," Miller replied. "The ones who were most exploited by the old council see the benefit clearly." "And the others?" Stone asked. Miller's expression hardened slightly. "They've seen what we can do. They know we could have taken control of the galaxy by force. But we didn't," Stone said. "No," Miller agreed. "And that's the most powerful message of all." As they watched, representatives began to signal their approval of the draft. One by one, species that had been enemies or strangers just months ago found common ground. The novel representative approached Miller. "My people will support this new assembly. But what about Thorn, Verex, and the others? They still have powerful fleets." Miller exchanged a glance with Stone. "They have a choice to make. Join us under these new terms, or remain isolated. Either way, they're no longer a threat." "For how long?" asked the novel. Stone smiled confidently. "As long as necessary." In the space above them, human ships patrolled silently, their new technology keeping watch over a galaxy on the edge of a new era. 1 year later, representatives from over 100 species gathered on _Unity Station _, a massive structure built by human engineers in neutral space. Its vast assembly hall could hold thousands, with translation systems ensuring everyone understood each other perfectly. Ambassador James Miller stood at the center platform beside Admiral Elizabeth Stone. They watched as the final signatures were added to the new Galactic Assembly Constitution. "The motion passes with unanimous approval," announced the elected speaker, a being from a species that had never held power in the old council. "The Constitution of the Galactic Assembly is now in effect." Applause and various sounds of approval filled the chamber. Species that had once been bitter enemies now sat side by side as equals. Even the former council powers were present. After months of isolation, Thorn, Verex, and the others had finally accepted the new reality. Their representatives sat in the same type of seats as everyone else. No special platforms, no extra privileges. As the formal session ended, delegates moved to the celebration hall. Food and drink from 100 worlds were shared in a symbol of unity. Miller found himself approached by an elderly being with blue-gray skin and 6 eyes arranged in a circle around its head. He recognized Professor Xalt, a renowned philosopher from one of the oldest species in the galaxy. "Ambassador Miller," Xalt greeted him with a respectful gesture. "Your people have accomplished something remarkable." Miller smiled. "We had help from many allies." "Yes, but it was humanity who made it possible." Xalt's eyes blinked in a thoughtful pattern. "I have studied many species across many centuries, and yours puzzles me the most." "How so, Professor?" "When you revealed your technology, the ability to manipulate space-time, to disable faster-than-light travel, to hide entire fleets, you could have conquered the galaxy." Xalt gestured around the room. "Instead, you created this. Why?" Miller considered the question. "Throughout human history, we've learned that conquest never lasts. Building together is always stronger than forcing others to submit. But your species has fought many wars," Xalt pointed out. "Yes," Miller agreed. "We're capable of terrible violence when threatened. That's why the old council's plan would have failed. They thought they could use us as weapons, not realizing we would eventually turn those weapons against them. A dangerous miscalculation, Zalt said. The most dangerous thing about humans isn't our technology or our fighting ability, Miller explained. It's that we can be either your greatest allies or your worst enemies. The old council chose to make us enemies. We're offering everyone the chance to be allies instead. Zalt's eyes blinked in what Miller had learned was a sign of deep understanding. A paradox indeed. The species most capable of war becomes the architect of peace. Later that evening, as the celebrations continued, Stone found Miller on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Quite a view," she said, joining him. "Worth all the trouble to get here," Miller agreed. Stone handed him a secure tablet. "We just received this from Deep Space Observatory 7. Miller's expression grew serious as he reviewed the data. "Are they certain?" "Yes." Stone nodded. "The readings are clear. Something is coming from beyond the galaxy's edge. Something big." The images showed strange energy patterns at the farthest reaches of their sensors, patterns that matched no known phenomenon. "How long do we have?" Miller asked. "Years, maybe decades," Stone replied. "But it's definitely coming our way." Miller looked back at the celebration through the transparent doors. Species that had been divided for centuries were now talking, laughing, sharing ideas. "Should we tell them?" Stone asked quietly. Miller thought for a moment. "Not yet. Let them enjoy this victory first. But start the preparations. Quietly. This new threat, it could be worse than anything we've faced," Stone warned. Miller nodded. "Yes, and that's exactly why we needed to create the assembly. Because whatever's coming, none of us can face it alone." Stone looked out at the stars. From peace negotiations to galactic unification to defending against an unknown threat, all in less than 2 years. "That's humanity for you," Miller said with a slight smile. "We never do anything halfway." As they stood watching the stars, a shooting light streaked across the darkness, a symbol of both beauty and warning in the vast universe, now united under humanity's unexpected leadership. The vast chamber of the Galactic Council glowed with soft blue light. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in rising tiers around a central speaking platform. The air hummed with translation devices and the quiet whispers of a dozen species. James Miller sat straight-backed in the human delegation's seat. His gray suit was perfectly pressed, his face calm despite the growing tension in his chest. For 6 hours, he had listened to the council members talk about everything except Earth's petition for full membership. "The human territories must increase their ore exports by 30%, said Councillor Thorne, his tall, thin body swaying as he spoke. His skin had the texture of tree bark, and his 4 eyes blinked in different patterns. "This is non-negotiable." Miller made a note on his tablet. "Another demand. Always demands, never compromises." "And what does Earth receive in return?" he asked, his voice steady. Thorne made a dismissive gesture with 3 of his 6 limbs. "The continued protection of the Galactic Council, of course." The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement. Miller noticed how the larger species nodded while the smaller ones remained silent. The pattern was always the same. "Earth has requested access to the Council's medical database for 3 decades, Miller said. "Yet we are still denied." "Your species is too young," rumbled the massive representative of the Carex Dominion, a creature that looked like a walking mountain of purple crystal. "The knowledge must be earned." Miller took a slow breath. For 50 years, Earth had played by their rules. For 50 years, humans had been patient, offering their technology, resources, and labor in exchange for a seat at the table. And for 50 years, the Council had moved the goalposts. His secure tablet vibrated. A message from Admiral Elizabeth Stone appeared on the screen. *URGNT. Long-range sensors DTCT massive IFLET SMBLOD in HFY 'Council species markings CONFI RMED*. *. Miller felt a cold rush through his body. Sector 17 was only 2 jumps from Earth. There was no reason for a fleet to gather there, unless the Council had been planning something all along. A second message flashed. Asterisk from Earth Command. Abandon ni GOTLHHONS INMEDLATLY. Code Phoenix INNIT. Asterisk. Miller looked up at the chamber full of beings who had been lying to his face for years. His earpiece quietly delivered a soft voice from Earth. We've seen enough. Ambassador, it's time to walk away. The Iridian representative was speaking now, listing new regulations for human colonies. Miller stood up slowly, interrupting the alien mid-sentence. The chamber fell silent. No one interrupted council proceedings. Ambassador Miller, said the Grand Speaker, his gelatinous body pulsing with light. You have not been recognized to speak. Miller smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. I don't need your recognition anymore, he said. His voice was calm but carried throughout the chamber. As of this moment, Earth and all human colonies formally withdraw from all negotiations with the Galactic Council. Shocked murmurs rippled through the room. You cannot simply withdraw, said Thorne, his body stiffening with alarm. There are protocols, procedures. We're done with your procedures, Miller said. He closed his tablet and slipped it into his pocket. For 50 years, humanity has offered friendship and received exploitation in return. We have honored every agreement while you have broken yours whenever convenient. This is most irregular. The Grand Speaker pulsed rapidly, his lights flashing in distress. Earth has contributed more technological advances in 5 decades than some of your members have in centuries, Miller continued. Yet we are still treated as children. No more. Are you threatening the Council? Asked the Carex representative, leaning forward. Miller laughed. It was a sound that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Not at all. We're just going home. He turned and walked toward the exit. The human aides at the back of the room were already packing their materials, their movements quick and practiced. Ambassador Miller, called Thorne. If you leave now, there will be consequences. Miller paused at the door and looked back at the chamber. There certainly will be, he said quietly, just not the ones you're expecting. The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss. In the shocked silence that followed, the council members looked at each other with growing unease. No one had ever walked away from the Galactic Council before. No one knew what would happen next.